It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Lafe Bailey. Lafe is co-CEO of the Wenger Group and is president of the Sales and Business Development Division at Wenger. Lafe has been with his third-generation family firm for 30 years, and this tenure has allowed him a unique perspective on the industries which they serve, as well as transnational businesses and cycles of innovation. Lafe is a graduate of Kansas State University, and believing that the stresses of Sabetha city life to be too burdensome, Lafe resides in the countryside with his wife and 4 children, where they can enjoy horseback riding and the shooting sports. Lafe Bailey, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Great to have you here, and wonderful to talk as kind of fall comes into bear here. We were talking a few weeks ago, and things were quite hot in both of our locations. Are they cooling down a little bit in your neck of the woods?
They are. We've had a couple glorious days.
The wonders of fall. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Well, listen, let's start a little bit about your early days. Tell us a little bit about that, kind of your early years. Where'd you grow up? And what your early family life was like?
I still live in the same general area where I was born, a little tiny village really called Sabetha, Kansas. We're in the extreme northeast corner of Kansas. Sabetha is 2,500 people, has been roughly that size for many, many generations. We are deep in the heart of agricultural country, but Sabetha is a very industrial little community. We have a lot of other businesses outside of the Wenger Group that have called Sabetha home and continue to provide manufacturing jobs for the surrounding area.
Right. Gosh, I can imagine you're probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest employer there.
Right. Yeah. We are.
Tell me about your parents, brothers and sisters. I know this is a family firm, so it's probably been an important part of your life and your siblings' life as you've been growing up.
Right. It has been. The company was actually founded by my grandfather and one of his brothers.
Right.
And then down through the generations, we are completely into that, what they call cousins consortium. So myself and 2 of my first cousins are co-CEOs. That's a very unusual arrangement.
Wow. Yeah.
Even today. And that has definite advantages, some disadvantages. But I grew up, actually, my parents felt that Sabetha was far too cosmopolitan. So I grew up out in the countryside with horses and cattle and an agricultural background. I'm the first one in my immediate family. My mother, of course, worked in the company when she was young in high school and college years, and then became a stay-at-home mom. My father was pure cowboy all the time. So again, we grew up with horses and cattle and all of that. And I joined the company beginning some high school summers and then joined the company right out of college.
All right. So Dad was never involved in the business?
Never directly, no.
Yeah, came through the mother's side. What about brothers and sisters? Did they get involved at all?
I have one older sister, and she, her skills and talents and aspirations were not with the company. So I'm the first one to not bear the Wenger last name, to come into the family and be part of that management team. And that's had some journey as well.
Yeah. Are your cousins both with the Wenger last name?
They are, yes.
Co-cousins. Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. Terrific. So again, a little bit about the earlier life. What were, some of the inspirations, some of the folks that influenced you, the memories of mom and dad and growing up out in the country?
Yeah, definitely was raised around an agricultural lifestyle, the neighbors helping out each other and all that. So grew up with a very firm work ethic.
Mm,
Still, the word is my bond mentality, and just simply showing up when you even thought that a neighbor could use
mm,
an extra hand. So
nice.
very tight family bonds. My immediate family, very tight. Within the larger Bailey side of the family, close bonds, and certainly on the Wenger side as well. My parents, I don't want to make it sound like they didn't socialize, but family has always been our primary uh, avenue of exchange. So
Right, right.
we still carry that on today. Really, family comes first
Yeah,
is how I was raised, and a strong work ethic being pivotal to that.
yeah. And it sounds like service was a very important part as well. Service to
Absolutely.
other family members, service to the
Yeah.
community, service to neighbors.
Yeah, it was really, I look back on it now. At the time, I didn't, certainly didn't think it was anything unusual or special, but what I've learned over the years and having my wife and I having our own family and going through various stages is we really, I think, learned at a very early age to subordinate ourselves
Mm,
and our personal desires, to subordinate those to the larger family,
mm,
the immediate family unit, as well as, the next level out. And that really has created a strong bond. It's made us be very patient, made us be
right.
very understanding with each other's quirks and uh, skills and weaknesses. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's been a
How,
good.
you obviously were taught that, but I'm sure you observed that as well, Leif. What are some of your earliest memories of seeing that play out in your family?
Yeah. I think what makes Sabetha and operating a global business inside of Sabetha and this general area, I've often been asked by industry, by associations, with Winger's position today, why are we still located in a town of 2,500?
Right.
And it really gives us a unique flavor in regard to teamwork. So the
Hmm,
best
hmm.
example is that, like everyone else in the world, I go to work and I spend my working day with people. But the unique thing is at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever it may be, I don't really have a chance to get away from those people. So if I have an
Right.
argument at
Right.
work, I have to keep in mind that in 20 minutes, I'm going
Yeah.
to see that same person at the
Right.
basketball game,
Right. Right.
and our
Or
kids are
sit at the
best
table with them.
friends.
Yeah.
I'm going
Right.
to, yeah, I'll be at the church Deacon board
Right.
meeting.
Right.
So,
Right.
so it's we have the microcosm of our
Mm,
immediate family. Most of the families, thankfully, have still in this area still choose to come back home. It's a great place to raise family and kids, and so we've got multiple levels of family all the way out into the general population.
mm. Yeah. Well, that's a real good credo. Treat others that you work with as if you would see them 24 hours a day. You live
Yeah,
that.
absolutely,
But I think if those
absolutely.
of us that live in larger towns and maybe don't spend that much time kept that in mind, yeah, we'd
Yeah,
probably have better cultures and better
yeah,
relationships.
yeah, maybe so.
Leif, both you and I are members of C12, a terrific peer advisory organization for
Right.
CEOs globally. I think we're up to about almost 2,500, 2,600 members now. I think there's over 100 chapters. How long have you been involved with C12?
I believe I am closing in on my fourth year.
Wonderful, wonderful. I've just, crossed my second year. So tell
Okay.
me a little bit about your Christian upbringing. Was your family a Christian home? Did you come to Christ later in life?
Actually, did grow up in a very Christian home. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up, so a lot of the small towns in the Midwest are formed typically around churches.
Right.
Sabetha, for
No
the most
exception.
part, happened to be formed around a very old line Anabaptist type church, so very
Okay.
traditional.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in that environment. Again, a very respectful, very family oriented, Bible based. So I I met Christ at a very early age,
Awesome.
and I can't point to any one event, any one lightning strike, or anything like that. I've just always had a relationship. Although when my wife and I, when our kids were growing older and hitting those peak formative years of high school and college, we just felt like we were not continuing to grow
Hmm.
in that Anabaptist tradition. So we left and joined a local evangelical church.
Uh-huh.
And it's really been fantastic
Hmm.
for us as a couple, us individually, and then for the kids. So I would say that I knew Christ at a very early age, and thankfully never strayed from that.
Yeah.
But I really got to know Christ as an adult through that evangelical teaching.
And
So
then your kids were brought up in that church as
absolutely,
well. Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
yep.
Back in the early days, high school, middle school, were you a good student?
I was an incredibly average student. So
Excelled at the things that you enjoy, I'm sure.
yeah, it was not something that I found that I had to work hard to get average grades,
Right.
so I didn't. And honestly, my parents really stressed that school and grades and assignments and all that was just a part of my overall education. So they
Sure.
really encouraged me to get home. I spent a lot of my early years raising dogs, training horses, working on the land, hunting, fishing, all that, just getting
Right.
out and
Right.
exploring.
Yeah. Any other, school-based activities, sports, music, theater, or was it mostly
Yeah,
getting back to the farm?
all of those things. Again, in a small town, tryouts for events or clubs or teams is not terribly hard.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I was an athlete, again, probably an average athlete, enjoyed it. Where I really started to find myself was in two teachers, a vocal teacher and one
Hmm.
of our theater teachers. And
Oh,
they were both deeply faithful people, just really had their lives put together in perspective, and really poured into me a lot and helped me in those kind of high school formative years.
that's awesome. So did some drama, did some school
Yeah,
plays, speaking, debate as well? Was that part
uh,
of the
did some
curriculum?
debate,
Yeah.
some singing, and all of that.
The art of good public speaking, unfortunately, has been lost so often in our early
True.
school days. I was involved in drama and also debate, both in college and high school, and I know how much that helped me in my corporate career. Have you felt as
Right.
well that learning those early learnings about presentation and thinking on your feet has helped you as you've advanced your career?
Oh, absolutely. That
Yeah.
some of those even techniques, of course, were
Right.
incredibly helpful, but the
Right.
biggest one was just the ability to step out on stage or in front of the microphone when
Right.
you're scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Getting over stage fright. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and
And I've always
just
found debate very helpful too. I think being able to, particularly as a CEO, looking at both sides of the equation, right?
right.
Being able to really debate and understand it. And particularly when you have people that are working for you that have conflicting viewpoints, right? And,
That is
being
so
able to
true.
identify and work through them. Any entrepreneurial things you're involved with, or did you get involved in the company business, the family business very quickly?
Probably the earliest age I was raising and selling what in the ranching community is called Queensland Blue Heeler dogs. So they're
Ha,
cattle herding
wow.
dogs, and
Yeah.
I was doing that in middle school, and it was very profitable,
Really? Yes.
and really enjoyed it all through those years. And
Did you have
beyond,
both the male and the female, or did
did
you? Yeah.
yes, yep,
Wow. Cool.
yep,
Cool.
yep. So
Great.
that
So
was
were
a good
they
experience.
they're thoroughbreds, were they, or not
Uh huh.
thoroughbreds? Or is that? I don't
Yeah.
know if that's the term for dogs.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a specific breed
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
of that. But
Fantastic. So you did
um,
that through school, and then when did you go to work for Wenger?
I worked a couple summers in high school and a couple
Okay.
summers in college,
Yeah. Yeah.
but did not formally join until after graduation.
Got it. Now, mom and dad, did they go to college, or did they have any professional education?
No,
And
no.
older sister, did she go on, or
Yes, she
she
went to
did?
college. Yes.
Was it kind of expected of both of you that that's what you would do at a certain point in time?
Yes, it was. I think at
Yeah.
that point in history, that was just the starting to be the expectation that
Right.
was the next step. We really didn't even question it. We just
Yeah.
knew that after high
that was your
school,
path.
that would be the next step, and we would dig a little bit deeper into a particular area that interested us.
So how did you go about doing that? How did you kind of decide what college you go to and what to study there?
Yeah, the closest and the one that I felt the most bonded to is Kansas State University. It's about 90 minutes away. A really good mechanical engineering, food and feed science are some of the strong points of Kansas State. And I honestly, in knowing a little bit about the company and visiting with my grandfather and my uncle, who was president at that time, my grandfather was chairman, thought that I would go into engineering.
Right.
And it
engineering with the company.
Yes, but engineering at K-State, learning that, getting a degree. And it did not take long for me to understand that I was not cut out to be an engineer.
How many semesters?
It was more like how many weeks.
Pretty quickly.
It was, I think I walked out of the first day with an ashen, stunned look on my face.
Your head spinning. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And very quickly transferred over into the business college thinking that, well, surely I can find something there, and really started to find myself and get engaged in all of that. So
was there an area of specialty? Did you find accounting more interesting, or business law, or anything like that?
For me, it was primarily the management disciplines. Did gravitate towards marketing as well. I wound up with a marketing degree with an emphasis in management, and also one in public relations. So
cool.
Kind of tried to cover, again, more of that public speaking, presence, strategy. I enjoy the strategy portion of the business more than anything.
Now, your work at the family firm prior to graduating, did that include management responsibility, or was it kind of, working on the line, helping out around the loading dock, that type of thing?
It was absolutely pushing a broom and running a scoop shovel.
Right.
The dirtiest jobs possible.
It's something to say, though, about doing those entry-level things, right? Particularly if you come in later. So went to work full-time out of school. What was that first job at the company?
The first job was primarily analyzing markets and assisting in setting the overall innovation and sales marketing strategies.
Oh, right. Now, you'd mentioned when we spoke a few weeks back that Wenger is quite unique, particularly given that you're center of the country and in a quite small town, that you've got quite a bit of international business. In fact, I think you said close to 80%, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
And was it Granddad that kind of got you into that business, and had that been already established by the time you joined?
Well, what's kind of interesting, most people probably my age can look back over the career or over the length of the company and see all these pivotal moments when something happened. So Granddad was not interested in international markets whatsoever. It caused him anxiety to think of all that complexity. And at that time, we were founded in 1935 and went through the war years and all of that. But we were in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s, we were actually importing some equipment from overseas. We worked with an import-export firm in Kansas City, developed a relationship with the owner of that export-import firm.
Right.
And he started just talking to us and learning about Wenger, and he's really the one that took us into export markets. Our first export sale was in 1953 to Venezuela, of all places.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we really have just continued to grow from that point until today. 80% is export.
That's great. And how many countries do you do business in today?
Today, every country that the U.S. State Department will allow. And so, again, over the long span of Wenger history, in the 60s and 70s, we were doing business quite happily, quite successfully in Syria.
Yeah, Iran, probably.
Iran, absolutely. And as those political environments change, of course, so does our ability to sell. But we have equipment really probably in Central Africa would be the only populated country that we do not have some equipment or some presence in.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, it's such a success story. And did you take on some leadership responsibilities fairly early on? Did they rotate you through a number of different positions? How did your career get started?
Yeah, I would say at that point in time, we did not have any kind of career paths or anything like that. So it was very much jump in the deep end or get thrown into the deep end and see if you can come back to the surface. So that was
sink or swim.
I started in what we call our Wenger Technical Center. It's kind of a research facility for ourselves and for the industry to use. And, again, started pushing brooms and unloading sacks of ingredients. And in my spare time was starting to dig into the marketing strategy and all of that, and spent several years in that kind of flux environment, a little bit of both, and then eventually gravitated towards just strictly setting up strategy and working within the sales department and growing Wenger presence worldwide.
Do you remember the first time you started managing other people, Lafe?
I do. Actually, that one of my first experiences in managing was I worked through college. My parents, fortunately, could provide for that, but I needed to work in college for me and to develop kind of my own sense. And I worked in a men's clothing store selling high-end Hart Schaffner and Mark suits as a college kid, and I still have no idea how I lucked into that position and wound up getting to manage other college kids that were part of that group.
Nice.
And it was really instrumental. I got to work directly under the owner and a World War II vet that were kind of partners in that. And the World War II vet was just a phenomenal individual and really poured a lot into me at that formative time as well.
Learned a lot about sales too, I'm sure, and customer service.
Yeah. Never to underestimate the person walking in the door. I got to
That's
I got to sell suits and fit suits to CEOs and janitors, and you never knew what the situation would be, and it was really enjoyable.
Right. What about managing people at Wenger? When did that come about?
That came about, I think, probably my 8th or 9th year. Just began managing parts of our sales force and being more on the front line with customers and dealing with that. Of course, had the long-term perspective and understood really what the Wenger mission was and how we wanted to approach things. And that was really helpful. And still, even at that young age, I was managing people that were quite a bit my senior.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But again, in this small environment, blessedly, they I think understood and appreciated that Wenger is family owned, that we've done a good job of doing that. So we never really have gotten too hung up on titles here at Wenger. It's much more been about what you do and how you go about doing things. So was fortunate to have some really good examples and some good coaching from actually my quote unquote subordinates at the time.
Sure. And I imagine it could have been a little difficult given that you were a family member and you were managing people that had worked there maybe as old as you were, right, at the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did that create any problems for you early on during those days?
I can't avoid the fact that, yes, it did. There were some relationships that were just always somewhat tense or trying. And again, others were just incredible situations where my elder / subordinate poured into me and would pull me aside and say, you could probably approach it a little bit better by doing this.
What were some of those lessons? Can you remember some of those from the early days?
Probably more than anything, it was me and my youth and enthusiasm taking a moment to slow down, to think through, to really listen, and more than anything, just to put myself in their shoes. So, they are the group that I was working with was predominantly out in the marketplace trying to convince prospects to buy the Wenger product, but often they had as much hard work once they brought the order inside Wenger. And there's, dealing with engineering and
Right.
production scheduling and manufacturing and all that. So quickly, I found that most of my time was spent internally trying to get the rest of the Wenger team to understand different perspectives.
Right. Because you do quite a bit of custom work, from what I understand.
We do, yes.
Yeah.
We have a number of quite a broad range of products, but each one of those products is generally customized specific to the customer's needs.
Right. I'm sure that's been a huge differentiator, particularly as you've grown globally, right?
Absolutely.
Because the needs of each individual marketplace has to be very different. Was it kind of a foregone conclusion that you'd be CEO someday? Did you want that? Thinking back again to those early years, was it expected of you? What kind of went through your mind during those first 5 or 10 years or so you were there?
Honestly, it was never pushed on me. My parents didn't. The rest of the family didn't. I just wanted to join something that had been such a part of my forming and my family's life. And I knew the role that Wenger had in the community and how hard it is for small towns to continue to grow and thrive. And I wanted to be part of feeling that obligation. And I do enjoy that feeling of obligation that comes with being really a cornerstone of our community. A lot of the other industry that has formed in Sabetha have either been friendly spinoffs of Wenger or people that have started something completely unrelated, but come to us for advice.
Right.
And so I really love what we've got going on here in Sabetha. It's, as I like to say, it's not quite Mayberry, but we can see Mayberry from here. So just an outstanding environment. And every week we have visitors from around the globe that come in to visit Wenger or one of the other companies in the area. So we are a very international little town. It is so unusual.
Sounds so unique. I hope to be able to visit someday, as we spoke last time. Tell us a little bit about your ascension to CEO. You'd mentioned earlier that you've got 2 cousins that are all co-CEOs. Were you all appointed at the same time? Did you join later, earlier? How did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, there's about a 10, 11-year gap between me and my oldest cousin, who's also a CEO. And then the second one is kind of right in between us.
Right.
And again, when we came into the company, there was no career planning, no path, just grab something and
get her done.
And get her done. Exactly. And we all tended to gravitate towards different areas. And that was, again, to me, I look back and I think that was not just happenstance. That was guided, as we see so many things happening in our company that have divine intervention behind them. So we gravitated towards different areas.
Yeah.
And it was a situation where we just continued to take more and more responsibility, and that was really expected. It was never coached from the second generation.
Right, because your uncle was CEO, I presume, right, at the time you joined. Yeah, right.
Their father. So he was primarily interested in seeing really how much backbone we had. We really worked into the role, and we began really operating as division presidents, you could say, without the title. And we operated that way for many years. And we one day realized that, we are spending so much time within, for example, my group. I'm constantly within my group encouraging and coaching them that as sales, we need to do a better job of preparing and planning information for our coworkers, which are in a different silo, but we spent so much time encouraging teamwork amongst our direct reports. And we realized it's going to be really hypocritical if we spend years coaching teamwork and then the company turns around and sees us fighting over who's going to get to be CEO. So we just sat down one day and said, we're going to be co-CEOs. We're going to do strategy, long-term strategy together. We're going to agree on it or we're not going to do it.
Wow.
But then within our direct reports, my responsibility in sales, business development, and technical center is to make sure that my groups are harnessed and pulling towards that long-term strategy. And that's worked incredibly well for a long time.
So the three of you pretty much succeeded then, your uncle and their father simultaneously.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Got it.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not been without bumps or
it's a unique situation.
Sometimes some long periods of frustration, and we so far have always been able to come together and tend to put, again, maybe it's that family culture that we're bound to kind of put our differences and honestly sometimes our grudges aside and focus on a bigger picture. Some of that's our faith upbringing, and some of it's again just the fact that we don't vacation together, we don't do all of that, but our families are
your lives are
close.
Very well integrated. Yeah. You spoke earlier about divine intervention. Tell me a little bit about that. Give me an example, maybe how Christ was involved in the business, or your faith led you to making decisions that really perhaps became clearer later that he was involved, but you didn't see it at the time.
So my grandfather, again, the founder, 7th grade education, height of the Depression, and Dust Bowl, all of those things. So he and his wife, my grandmother, always had a deep, deep faith, again, coming from that Anabaptist, very traditional background.
Right.
So even growing up, when we were at an age and the family was to the size where we were still going to Grandma and Grandpa's on Sunday afternoons for supper or, birthdays and all of that, invariably, Grandpa would talk about faith and how it has impacted the company. Now, I would say at that point in time, and even in the second generation, faith was still something fairly private. So if asked by a client or somebody, they would say, Wenger looks a little and acts a little different. Why is that? He would just say, well, we're based on faith, and he would drop it. As the generations have gone on, we've become much more open and vocal about that. The importance of faith. For us, it's the Christian faith. For some of our employees, it's a different faith, and we are perfectly fine with that. But we just grew up always knowing, Grandpa always saying, I barely made it out of the 7th grade. All I did was work hard, and God blessed me with the rest. He blessed me with good people at the right time, and here's where we are today. So basically, he always coached us, don't ever think it's your own making, because it's not.
Absolutely. Well, that's terrific. And, it sounds like that's a very important thread within the Wenger culture. You as a third generation CEOs, how do you kind of continue that legacy? What are your thoughts on continuing to build a company culture? What types of things do you do? What does that look like on an ongoing basis?
Right. It's a great question. As the company has grown, so, multiples of sales growth and people today, we're right at 500 people worldwide. About 350 of those are in Sabetha. And so we have, over time, we've had to codify more and more, because so many of the people that are joining us today, they didn't know Lou or Joe Wenger or how or why.
They didn't know Grandpa.
So we do still value our tradition, our history. We do still talk about it and incorporate that into our presentations. But really, we try to respect and honor the past. But we're really much more about where we're going as a company, where we can innovate, where we can bring value. That's our biggest thing, where we can bring value to not only our customers, but our vendors, our employees, the schools that they attend, the communities that they live in. And so we're just always trying to live out those values. We have firmly established vision, mission, and values that we reinforce constantly. And probably the biggest thing that has helped us in that transition into becoming more of what we are today, where we're known for being a very faith-based organization, is we started absolutely encouraging, almost demanding that when you, Mr. Team Member, out on the floor or based in Sri Lanka, when you see me do or say something that's hypocritical to vision, mission, values, honestly, if you love me, you will call me on
Call it out. Yeah.
So we do emphasize that a lot, and some of that has been very embarrassing and very painful.
Right.
But as our team members have seen us kind of own that hypocrisy and make correction, it's really built an incredibly strong bond of trust within our group. So when crisis happens, and we've had some crises happen, both financially, economically, but we lost a very loved and long-term service technician in the Brussels airport terrorist bombing.
Goodness. Yeah.
Just it's the peaks and valleys that family goes through, and sometimes family has to speak very candidly to each other.
Right. Excellent. Cool. That's great. Thank you for your candor on that. We're almost out of time, but I've got a couple extra questions. This has gone so quickly. What do you look for, Lafe, when you're looking to make bets on the people you hire and then invest in?
Okay. I think that's a fantastic question. Really, again, we look for people who not only tell us or say the right things, but we watch them in action. So really for us, it kind of goes back to that cowboy code of ethics. Don't just tell me how good you are at this position. I'll trust you, but you're going to have to show it, and you're going to have to produce it. And I really like to see people both under pressure, and I like to see people how they act when they're outside of the work environment. And one of the best examples was my first business trip. I'm young, just out of college, and I'm with one of the Wenger superstars. I mean, this guy is literally, in our industry, he is known and revered around the world, and I'm traveling with him. And we stop at a McDonald's late one night, and there's a teenage kid there who's mopping the floor, and I was headed to the bathroom, so I know this guy was not doing it as a show to me, but as I came back out, I saw Galen's back turned to me, and he was talking to this teenager saying, "You are doing a really nice job. I appreciate how clean this McDonald's is." And I could see the teenager's spine straighten up, and he took pride, and he smiled, and it just transformed that kid. And I thought, right there, I have seen what great leadership, great servant-heartedness is about. Nobody told me. I just watched one of my coworkers do it, and I thought, man, I want to be that guy.
That's awesome.
So that's what I look for, is people who contribute to, who build up others.
And how do you get that? How do you get that in an interview environment then, or do you do other things beyond the face-to-face to kind of get at that? Because that observational behavior is hard to see.
It is very hard to see. So we do ask a lot of kind of odd peripheral questions just to get a sense for that. So being in Sabetha is kind of a microcosm.
They're living there already. Chances are you're 1 point of separation from them at most.
I'm honestly, every year I'm watching the high school sophomore, junior, seniors, and seeing what they get involved with, how they are. Just how they interact, and we interact a lot and do a lot of high school tours and all of that. So some of the other positions being brought in, that's when we have to do a little bit more of our homework and multiple interviews, multiple people, multiple interviews.
Well, there's a big advantage of having a great company in a small town. Get to know your potential workforce real quickly and very well.
Absolutely.
Keep your pulse on the labor market. Excellent. Well, last question, Lafe, and we ask this of all our CEOs. What career and life advice would you give to someone who, has their eyes on the corner office themselves? Maybe they're in a family business like you. Maybe it's third or fourth generation, and they're competing with a bunch of cousins to get to the top, or perhaps they're in a corporate environment, but they're 10, 15 years your junior. What kind of things would you tell them about what to do if they have their ambition for additional responsibility and leadership?
Probably one of the most critical things for me over the years is to have, for me in particular, it was to have that basis in faith, and to be able to establish very early on guardrails. I had a lot of good advice in terms of establishing guardrails, in that I'm going to be traveling internationally. Nobody's going to see me, but you better have guardrails. Yep. And so for me, it was an understanding that I needed the guardrails. I would be tested, and just to be prepared for that. So probably the other thing is I always encourage the high school kids that I interact with, that they cannot wait for opportunity to knock. They have to get out in the street and play and get knocked around by a few cars before they find one that they can grab onto that will take them somewhere. And then for me, the final thing is to always look at life as a series. And again, I think this is primarily divine intervention. I do think obstacles and opportunities are synonymous, that they are closely matched. And I think today's culture, we tend to avoid obstacles. We tend to avoid pain. We tend to avoid frustration. And I think biblically, we're just told that is part of our life, and it's how we embrace that that really counts. So probably more than anything, the advice I would give, it's how I sign all of my communication. It's press on regardless, period. And to really kind of absorb those trials and those frustrations and try to wring something out of them of worth, because you'll learn things you can't learn any other way.
Well, Lafe Bailey, co-CEO of the Wenger Group based in Sabetha, Kansas, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
I've enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.